Gregory, Craig, thanks for joining me on UpFront. You drafted the executive order which your then boss, Barack Obama, issued on his, I think, third day in office as president, announcing the shutdown of Guantanamo Bay by the 22nd of January 2010. We're now coming up to the 6th anniversary of that date. We believe President Obama is about to announce a plan to shut down Guantanamo Bay and go around the Congress. But how embarrassed are you? How ashamed are you that it's taken this long, that 6 years after the date, something you described rightly as a blight on American values and national security is still open?
Well, no one thought that it would be this difficult, to be quite honest. When the president was elected in 2008, the incumbent president, President Bush, supported closing the detention center in Guantanamo. President Obama's opponent in the campaign, 2008, Senator McCain, supported closing Guantanamo. And at the time he signed those executive orders, he thought that this was something that, in fact, would have no kind of political difficulties getting through. But thereafter, during 2009, 2010, it became a political issue, a partisan political issue. And the difficulties we've had closing Guantanamo are attributable to the fact that there are people in Congress that object to closing Guantanamo and have created obstacles to doing so.
You co-wrote a Washington Post op-ed last week, which was headlined, "The President Doesn't Need Congress's Permission to Close Guantanamo." Briefly explain to our viewers how you think Obama could bypass Congress and shut it down when the new Republican House Speaker, Paul Ryan, says the President doesn't have the authority to do that, he says, and the President himself has agreed to sign a new defense bill just this week banning the transfer of Guantanamo prisoners to the U.S. mainland.
Well, with respect, I disagree with the Speaker of the House on his understanding of the Constitution. There are two arguments here, Mehdi. The first argument is that under Section 2, Article 2 of the Constitution, the President is the Commander-in-Chief of the military in the United States of America. Part of that authority, we believe, is his ability to designate locations where law of war detainees or prisoners of war are held. And so we believe it's well within, smack dab in the core of his responsibilities and his authority as Commander-in-Chief to be able to say, I want to move for reasons related to our war objectives, and because of expense, it's terribly expensive, I want to move this detainee from this military facility to another military facility. And the second part of the argument is that the Congress of the United States, if it passes legislation that attempts to prohibit or interfere or limit his capacity as Commander-in-Chief to make these dispositions, those laws are unconstitutional.
If what you say is correct, and the President wants to shut down Guantanamo, has always wanted to shut down Guantanamo, and if he has the power under the Constitution as Commander-in-Chief to do it, to go around Paul Ryan and the other Republicans in Congress, then why hasn't he done it already? Why have we been waiting 6 years? Why didn't he do it on day 3?
He has always wanted to work with Congress on this, and he's always tried to work with Congress. What he has been focusing on, I think, over the last 6 or 7 years is to make sure that the evidence with respect to each and every detainee is understood as to their involvement in terrorism activities. That those who are, there are 3 buckets of people there. There's people who will be prosecuted for crimes. There will be people who will be discharged and have been identified as transferable. And there's a third bucket that falls in the category of law of war detainees that were neither going to be transferred or tried. So I think he's focused his attempt to close Guantanamo on transferring people that are eligible for transfer, trying the people that are being tried, and bringing back into the United States those people that should be housed in the United States. And the Congress at every point has objected. And he's still trying, Mehdi. He's still trying, actually, to work with Congress.
But if you're one of the 53 people at Guantanamo Bay out of the 112 remaining there who've been cleared for release, you might think to yourself, well, Gregory Craig, a man who knows the law, worked for President Obama, saying he could shut it down any time without Paul Ryan's permission, and yet here I am stuck in limbo in this god-awful place. Why? Why not just do it yesterday?
There are certain security concerns that they have on the transferability, as well as...
Well, not the 53 who've been cleared for release.
No, the 53 are not just free to send back to any place, because they will not be sent back to a place where they would be tortured or where they'd be mistreated or where they would experience themselves additional hardship.
Yep.
And we will not send them to places where we don't have some assurance that they will not engage in terrorist activities again. So there's a security concern there that exists with the 53. But you're right in pointing out that those 53 should be returned or transferred as promptly as is possible. They're mostly Yemenis at this point, as promptly as is possible, and that we're really talking about 59, the balance, 10 people who are in the they're going to be prosecuted bucket, and 49 people that are in the...
To go back to my question, just to be clear, yes or no, he could have shut it down theoretically under the law in 2012, 2013?
I believe he could have.
9 prisoners have died in custody at Guantanamo, and human rights abuses have been well documented by the FBI and others. Some of the worst of these abuses have happened on President Obama's watch. The very painful force feeding of shackled prisoners, for example, which the International Red Cross has called a form of torture. Is that something you argued against when you were part of the administration? And if so, do you think Obama officials, former colleagues of yours, should be held accountable in a court of law for some of the stuff that went on in Guantanamo?
The security arrangements inside of Guantanamo were the responsibility of the military to the extent that they totally complied with the Geneva Conventions. And our concern was that everything that was done inside of Guantanamo on President Obama's watch fully complied with the American laws and the international obligations. And I believe that they did. There's no doubt
Even
whatsoever.
when UN organizations, the Red Cross, as others say, that when you take a prisoner with a 6-member riot squad, strap him to the ground, force tubes up his nose, extreme pain, they call that a form of torture. You don't think that's anything
I think this is part of saving their lives, because they were involved in a hunger strike that would have caused them to lose their lives. And I think lawyers would not agree with that analysis.
So you don't think any human rights abuses in Guantanamo happened on President Obama's watch, despite what various groups and observers have said over the last few years?
Well, I don't think many groups and observers have found lots of human rights abuse in Guantanamo.
Well, they haven't been allowed to. The Obama administration, for example, refused to allow the OSCE to even come to Guantanamo and investigate. A lot of groups have been thwarted in trying to find out what's happening on the ground.
Well, I don't believe that force feeding is a human rights violation. It's unpleasant, it's unattractive. We don't want to have to do that.
Let's say President Obama doesn't close the Guantanamo prison, isn't able to do it by the end of his term, despite the legal powers you say he has. There's not much chance of a President Hillary Clinton shutting it down, is there? We know she's more of a hawk than Obama. We know from her email leaks that she's made jokes about Guantanamo prisoners. She hasn't been outspoken on this issue. Whether we get President Hillary Clinton or President Jeb Bush, we might be stuck with Guantanamo for a long time going forward if Obama doesn't do it now.
I just disagree with that. I think that there is a national consensus, and Secretary Clinton is part of that consensus, that Guantanamo today does more damage to the national interest, the national image, than it does good. And so, by the way, when she was Secretary of State, she was very vigorous in all the efforts that she was responsible for in trying to close down Guantanamo, and she supported all the efforts that the president made.
Would you call for her to make that pledge now as a presidential candidate that she will shut, as Obama did, because she hasn't made it so far as a presidential candidate?
I think she fully supports, I mean, I doubt that this is a problem for her. She fully supports closing Guantanamo, as do, may I say, most Democrats. This is a surprise.
You say national consensus. The sad truth is the American public aren't with you on this. In 2014, Gallup found that 66% of Americans are against closing Guantanamo Bay. That's the problem that politicians have. They don't want to go against a fearful public.
If the President of the United States took a leadership position, decided it was in the national security interest, and as Commander-in-Chief to advance our objectives in the war against terror, he would have the support of the American people in closing Guantanamo. I think he has the right to do it, and he should do it.
But it's been a failure of leadership.
I would not say it's a failure of leadership.
You said if he exercises leadership, therefore he hasn't exercised it so far on this issue.
He has pursued it in other ways, Mehdi. He's tried to work with the Congress, and that's not been successful.
And do you think he should issue an apology to the people in Guantanamo Bay who've been held there without trial, who turned out not to be terrorists? The man who was 89 years old, for example, the teenagers. Should there be an apology?
I think there's no need for the President of the United States to apologize to anyone. They know what his position has been and what he's been trying to do.
You don't think you should apologize to people you've held without charge who turned out to be completely innocent? No need for an apology.
Well, he worked very hard from the very first day.
Doesn't really help you.
No,
if I've been stuck in Guantanamo, the president working hard doesn't help me.
Well, he didn't put them there. The Uyghurs.
But he didn't shut it down, which you say he could have done any time. We discussed it. He said to me he could have done it in 2012. He could have done it in 2013. Therefore, it's on him.
He tried to work with the Congress of the United States to do it, and I am uncritical of him and his efforts. He worked very hard to do so.
Gregory Craig, thanks for joining me on UpFront.